Hey everybody, it's your friend Perch. I mean, maybe I don't know. Am I a friend? I I guess. I sure that just sounds very weak. Everybody's always into that right now. It's like this is weak. All right, let's talk about an email here. It says good video 2024 predictions. All right, let's see what we have to say. It says, hey Perch, enjoyed today's video with 2024 predictions. I think that I published this video in January, so that's giving you a sense of, I think, January 1st, actually. Nice to hear a shout out for Archie. People forget they have been in business since the 1930s with PEP and have maintained their distribution into other channels domestically and internationally. Did you catch the new Bollywood-style musical of the Archies on Netflix? Seems to me, Boom, Dynamite, and publishers that took on venture capital, Vault, Skybound, AWA, maybe Scout, are all likely to have debt and distress. Well, I don't think Skybound has so much, but yeah, those other guys. I don't know. You'll have to talk to Nick about Dynamite. Some of these others, though, even comic publishers that I think are appearing good or seem stable, there's definitely some issues with some of it, for sure. Anyway, it says IDW still has access to money, and so does Oni, but the reliance on licensed properties is limiting them. I'm curious to see how Mad Cave does this new slate of licensed books. Enjoying and appreciating your observations. Hope to keep going for a long time. So there wasn't really a question in there, but it does give me an opportunity to kind of, double click on some of these predictions. Look, I think that right now, if I'm making a company, and I am, it is wise to have a combination of licensed properties and original material, which isn't exactly a genius prediction or, some amazing insight, but rather it's just common sense to some extent. So the trick, though, is that licensed properties are appealing and attractive for one very simple reason. People, know those properties. Basically, it saves you the marketing of having to push some of these things out. So let's say, for example, you get the license for He-Man, okay, and you really want to do a He-Man comic. Well, what you're thinking at that moment is that the marketing and push of this He-Man comic should, in theory, be a lot less because everybody knows He-Man, and therefore you really just have to trot this thing out and go, hey, fans of He-Man, we've got a book for He-Man. And that's going to give you that built-in audience. And that's the whole appeal to license. However, licensed properties carry with them kind of two big, limitations, depending on your point of view of how you want to call it that. One is you're not fully in control. The licensor is. So say you do your He-Man book, but you'd really like your He-Man book to, deconstruct He-Man and prove that the entire time that it was actually Skeletor who was a good guy and all that kind of stuff. You have to get approval from the licensor. And depending on, the licensor and how protected they are on the property, that may or may not be possible. They may like your idea. They may shoot it down. They may come with a bunch of different rules. The other factor that you get is typically the business deals are not as good, meaning you're going to have to pay money to the licensor. You're going to have to cut them in some way. There's a bunch of different ways this can work. You can have what's called a recoupable, where you pay the licensor some amount of money, and then basically you recoup back. Sometimes it's the other way around, where you don't pay the licensor any money, but the licensor gets, 75% of all the revenue to a certain point until, the entry fee is paid. And then it's split more equitably 50-50. That's another way it often goes. So it just kind of really depends on the business terms, but that's one. The other is just, you've got a flat license fee that goes to the property. Basically, the more exciting and dynamic the property is, typically the tougher fee. So right now, if, for example, you want to do a comic book on Taylor Swift, you probably are going to need to be prepared to, bend over and take it by Taylor Swift, which, I don't know, Travis Kelce says is uncomfortable. So that's why he was so angry at the coach during that game. But anyway, the reality is the more popular a license is, you can start to get things like needing to pay the licensor, say, some amount of money up front, $150,000 upfront payment, and then you have to pay the licensor 50% of everything you make. And if it's a really popular property and you know how you're going to take it to market and everything else, then, you sign up for that deal. But there's been plenty of licenses where the comic company goes, yeah, we're definitely going to make something off of this because, like, Transformers, everybody loves Transformers. It's certainly going to do well. But, you come to realize that the fans of Transformers are not fans of comic books or, vice versa. Same thing with Taylor Swift. I think if you were to do a comic book on Taylor Swift, I think you'd quickly discover that most Swifties do not know how to read, and then you'd have a problem on your hands. So anyway, that's generally where that all goes. The challenge with a licensed property is, again, you just have to have the right business terms up front. There's definitely an incentive to do it, but it's often quick money. So the thing about a license is you typically get more money out of the gate than something original, unless you have a star creator or somebody who can put their own personal name toward things, in which case you typically wind up better. But it's an easier investment. So if you're starting out as a publisher, getting a couple license things is usually a pretty good deal for you, and it can work. But it is tough, and it's not. I don't know. The trap there is that easy money puts you into the cycle where you have to pay the licensor back, and then you're digging yourself a hole. So you get more licenses in order to quickly get the money to get the hole, and then you have a problem. The other thing is a lot of these companies, and this is something I've discovered as I've kind of leaned into some of this, is the company will get a bunch of licenses on their hands, and they'll negotiate, let's just say, bad deals or deals where they have the rights to do something, but then when they start publishing, they have to lay out a bunch of cash. And so what they do is they go collect a bunch of these licenses, and then they go to get capital, basically, from a bank or a VC or somebody like that. And they then run themselves into debt. So they take, if you think about the mathematics of this, they're going to take a $5 million loan from the VC or investment, and they're going to give up some stake of equity to do this. If it's a straight loan, then they're going to have to pay that back at some point. But if it's just venture, then you're going to have investors, and you're going to have people who are going to want some return on investment somehow. And so then you use that money to go buy a license, and the licensor is going to take, say, 50% of that money. So if you think about the pie of the money you're taking home, that dollar amount shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And if you're wondering why a lot of companies, smaller companies, they get these licenses, and then the creators involved are, let's just say, not top tier creators. I've had people come to me like, why didn't IDW, go get like Jim Lee and Neil Gaiman to do Transformers? Like why did they do something? Why didn't Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo get lured over from DC in order to do Transformers? And the idea is that you can't afford it. I'm talking way back when IDW was doing it. Skybound's got a little bit of a different game going on, but if you think about it, you don't have it once you've paid for the license, and once you've borrowed money from your investors, you're not left with a ton of cash to then go pay these creators. So that's where you're trying to do it kind of on the cheap, and the margin's really thin, and there's typically not a lot of room for edits, and I mean just this stuff all stacks up, and before you know it, you've got kind of a problem on your hands where you've got the license and you've taken a lot of debt in order to get there. But now you're going to, you have nothing left over for the actual product. And so the product doesn't sell as well, which means you don't make as much money to pay back your investor. Your licensor doesn't get very much. So they're unhappy too, because they, you sold them a dream of being able to do big things, and then you can't deliver it. And now you also, because you didn't make a lot of money off your licensed property, do not have much money to go get the next licensed property or to do the original work that you really wanted to do. So it becomes this circle to nowhere. And there's a lot of companies that have fallen into this trap. And if you think about it from a business perspective, what I just described, it explains a lot about how these small companies, they start up, and typically they jump out the gate, they want some attention, they go for some licenses because it's going to help them on marketing. There's always I've gotten a million emails and calls saying, hey, won't this work if I can just, defer the license cost, basically. And, and there you go. And then this trap occurs. So that's why you have a number of these companies that seem to start outside off the gate, and then they sink. Keep in mind, for the big brand licensors, the people who are actually really good at this, the people who, they do this for a living, they license to toys and video games and all the rest, they've got legal teams and business teams and sales teams whose entire purpose is to give them, the licensor, the best possible deal they can. And so if you think about a small comic publisher, landing a big license deal, they're up against an army of people. And if you do not know how to negotiate a good deal, have great legal representation, all the rest, if you don't have that all buttoned up, they're going to take you to the cleaners because you are not the first group that they're talking to. You know, they're used to doing deals with Activision, and I don't know why that's the first name that came to my mind, and Target and clothing distributors, and just like they're used to dealing with really big names. And so you come along, you know, to make your comic, and you have big dreams, but to you or to them, you're the tiny fish. And so you're not going to get a great deal, and they're just going to squeeze you to death, and they do. So anyway, there's the problem. But anyway, so a lot to look forward to. We'll see where 2024 goes. But if a couple of you sent me some mails asking about like what is the deal with licenses, how do some of these things structured, why do these companies find themselves in debt? Well, what I just described to you is quite a big way that they do. So there's other ways, of course. It's not the only way, but that's a pretty big way. Anyway, thanks for listening. Questions, as always, put them in the comments, and don't forget about your friend Perch. Thanks for listening.